Hey, what's going on, everybody? We are the DUALists. My name is Corey Dean.
And this is Ryan.
So, as you may be able to tell, we actually don't have any game footage this week. We haven't made an episode. We have not prepared any gameplay footage. But instead, we are doing a discussion because, as some of you might remember, last week at the end of our episode on Jamestown, we made an announcement about Dragon Quest Heroes, which was coming out on the 13th of October. And I had been preparing for this title for a long time. I remember when it was first announced in Japan, I was thinking at that time that there is no chance in hell this is ever coming out in the U.S. The U.S. does not get very many Dragon Quest games, and it's been a long time since we've had one. But this looks like an awesome title. I should probably import it at some point so I can play it. Funnily enough, they did announce it being released, and I'd been looking forward to it since I heard that announcement, which has been quite a long time. And so we had made a discussion beforehand about doing a Dragon Quest Heroes episode, considering that, number one, we are a very small channel. We're still just getting started, really, and we have been sticking to games that more or less are just clean, fun sort of games. Nothing really controversial about any of them. Opinions can vary from being just okay to really good. So we haven't really handled anything either that was either controversial, and at the same time haven't handled anything that was really topical. Nothing that was immediately released. Mostly just because of the fact that it was not always our practice to. It's very rare that we get a game on release. There's only a few that we really want to pick up on release, but this one was a big one, and it seemed like the perfect opportunity to do a game on release for the channel. So we had talked about it, and we decided to do it, and we were looking forward to it. However, Square Enix has thrown everyone who is a YouTube video game critic or let's player or just anyone a streamer.
Any YouTube or internet media personality of any sort that might present any kind of video game was thrown a curveball.
Yeah.
That's essentially what we're saying.
Yes. So I was sitting down, getting ready and excited to launch Dragon Quest Heroes. Started it up, only to notice that in the bottom right-hand corner of the start menu, there was a little button that says Notice About Streaming, and says Push Options button. And I was like, now that's odd. It's right here on the front screen. What could this be? And strangely enough, when I push start, it seems like by some stroke of pure coincidence, considering this is the first time we were trying to do this. The first game we ever tried to play that was immediately released and get a video out soon hasn't noticed.
Day one Let's Play.
Yeah, we were hoping to have out by, the 13th was the Tuesday. We were hoping to have the video up by Wednesday. And there is a notice on the front page stating, that basic information about Square Enix being copyright holders, as well as, Sugiyama Kobo music holding copyright, which Koichi Sugiyama has been doing Dragon Quest music since the original Dragon Quest game on Famicom. But underneath that, it quotes, streaming of this game is permitted only in non-commercial contexts. However, using streams of the game to primarily provide or listen to the music is prohibited even in such contexts. Now, it goes on to say, for information on terms for streaming, visit www.dragonquest-game.com/heroes. So I immediately decided, okay, well, I need to see what extent this sort of the terms of this are, because it makes specific mention of streaming in the notice, but it didn't explicitly say gameplay footage relating to YouTube Let's Plays or YouTube reviewers, YouTube critics, anything along those lines.
It was very vague.
It was very vague, yeah.
You get the impression of it being, at least for me, intentionally vague, so as to, I would think, plan for any contingency.
Right.
Vague in the sense that if something comes up that they hadn't foreseen or simply didn't feel like it was in their best interest to list every means of media and service and specifically put their attention on that one facet of media, I think rather than do that, they simply made a vague disclaimer within the main menu of the game.
Right.
So regardless of the media by which you were covering this game, you would be subject to some form of copyright protection that Square Enix would have the right to follow up on if they felt they wanted to or should.
Right. Now, I did go straight to the site, and reading the actual official notice on the website, it does go into more detail, but again, it is still a lot more of a blanket sort of statement that is still fairly difficult to fully understand what the true extent of all of this is. But I'm going to give you a little bit of a synopsis of what this says. Again, you can find these terms at dragonquest-game.com/heroes. Now, this is guidelines for live streaming and gameplay video. That is what is listed. It is essentially stating terms relating to gameplay footage, music in-game, images in-game, and just overall content included. But there's a big section here titled Permitted Distribution Methods, and it states that players may share the Dragon Quest Heroes content through the following methods. PlayStation 4 share feature. Use of Dragon Quest Heroes content is allowed for personal use only through the online services available with the PlayStation 4 share feature. The share feature may be unavailable for certain content and game areas as designated by Square Enix. 2. Streaming of gameplay video. Streaming, for example, including posting a link to the URL to the streaming video, or posting a thumbnail to the video for personal use on personal blogs and mini blogs such as Twitter, of gameplay video, including the in-game BGM, on video share sites available through the use of the PlayStation 4 share feature is allowed. Such video share sites may include, but are not limited to, YouTube, Nico, and Ustream. Streaming is limited to video share sites that have a consent agreement in place with the Japanese Society for Rights of Authors and Composers, the JASRAC, and the share feature may be unavailable for certain content and game areas as designated by Square Enix. Conditions of use: you must include credits, clearly show the following copyrighted information on all postings and distributions: 2015 Armor Project / Bird Studios, Koei Tecmo Games, Square Enix, all rights reserved, and Sugiyama Kobo copyright, which, by the way, just so you know, whenever you take any in-game screenshot or record any in-game video from your PS4, that information is automatically inserted into the bottom right-hand corner of your images and gameplay. So they added that feature in to be automatically put in, so that you would have to edit it out to actually get it out anyway. And it does say, in fact, below, this info will be automatically included when using the PlayStation 4 share feature under a future game update. Until then, please include the information into the materials manually, which that wasn't an issue upon release. Do not create derivative materials using the Dragon Quest Heroes content. For example, do not use Dragon Quest Heroes content to create brochures, t-shirts, or other images. This applies whether you intend to distribute the Dragon Quest Heroes derivative materials for free or for sale. Do not post the Dragon Quest Heroes content onto sites or services that require others to pay a fee to browse or stream. An exception to this is the Nico Nico Premium service. Do not post any Dragon Quest Heroes content or materials that may lead to the abuse of a specific user. All content, including images or videos, must be removed without delay upon receiving a removal request from Square Enix. Furthermore, Square Enix may delete any videos or streams in its sole discretion. And Square Enix makes no warranty or representations regarding the Dragon Quest Heroes content. Square Enix expressly disclaims that any such images or videos posted on the internet will not violate any third-party rights. Furthermore, Square Enix is not responsible for any disputes or conflicts that arise between any player and third party from the use of Dragon Quest Heroes content. Now, once again, pretty vague with its descriptions, but if I had to take an overall guess as to what essentially this means to YouTubers and to Let's Players of any kind, this is a typical notice of, not typical, but this is a notice of their intent to essentially use a typical content ID claim on any video you upload. Meaning if you are making any advertising revenue or crowdfunding or any sort of revenue from content from Dragon Quest Heroes, they will claim that content and they will take the revenue generated. Now, this isn't quite as infringing as something like a copyright strike, where they would take down the content entirely and put your account in bad standing, and also potentially even shut down your channel entirely, depending on how serious the offense was. But again, this is at the sole discretion of Square Enix, who have in the past been known to be a developer who is certainly not afraid nor unwilling to slam the fist down in terms of being kind of aggressive in claiming their content for Content ID and anyone that is making YouTube videos about their games. But us being a new channel, we haven't run into this issue at all yet, and it's a little disappointing, especially from a Dragon Quest game. With Square Enix, a Dragon Quest game getting this treatment is a little surprising.
I'm sure that first of all, we probably wouldn't even be making this video right now if it was not Dragon Quest that we were talking about.
Right.
Maybe, a few other things, but if this was a Dynasty Warriors game or any other Warriors game other than a Dragon Quest themed one, or not even necessarily a Koei Tecmo game at all, could be a lot of different things. We might not necessarily be making this if it wasn't a Dragon Quest game. And that put aside for a second, this whole thing sounds suspiciously like essentially a sort of mass obligatory review embargo.
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, these are the terms.
Right.
Of reviewing this game, and it reminds me a lot of the whole Shadow of Mordor. I guess that was a review embargo as well,
Right.
in its own right. And I think the part, Dragon Quest or no, that sort of gets on my nerves is that it sort of puts this connotation on the game that they're ashamed of it in some way.
Yeah.
It denotes a sense of unconfident, just, I don't want to use the word shame, that's a little strong, but some sort of effort to cover up coverage of the game.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that the whole ad revenue, the whole idea of, you know, this, like what went on with the music industry for so many years of certain artists saying we don't want people taking our music and getting it for free, which I realize this is an entirely different topic, but it somewhat reminds me of that. I don't think this is a case where Square Enix is thinking that we are doing this in order to seize the ad revenue as a priority for doing this. Well, it doesn't strike me as you know, anything but one of their maybe secondary reasons as to why to do this, whereas one of the primary reasons that they're doing this is that very idea that they don't want the game to get any sort of coverage that is not approved by them.
Right. Yeah. And that's, you know, you bring up the Shadow of Mordor embargo, and one of the most troubling things about this particular case is that with the Shadow of Mordor embargo and some of the embargoes around bigger AAA titles, most of those are released before the game comes out, and they're given to media outlets to put out terms and conditions for a game to have gameplay footage put out before it's released, meaning
that's true. You
there
know,
may still be...
I don't know the details and nuances of exactly what review embargo could potentially entail. So you might be right about that. But at any rate, it really reminds me of that.
Yeah, it's similar. It's very similar, and especially considering that, you know, the 2 points that you bring up that hit the nail on the head are number one, it does certainly feel like it they don't have much faith in their own products for part one.
Yeah.
And part two, that any sort of money being made off the game, they don't want other people to get any part of that. Whereas, you know, traditionally media has been about, you know, with review and critique to, you know, a company makes a product, they make money off that product, and media outlets review that product, put it in a publication, and they make money off of that publication by writing reviews about that product. Now that's gone on forever. Now YouTube is a very new form of that media that's really in its infancy, and a lot of publishers, and especially Japanese publishers, don't really have a full grasp of the way the YouTube system kind of works, especially with American audiences.
That's what I was alluding to.
And yeah, and
more so than the revenue element.
Right. As you notice, the biggest people who have released content ID claims have been companies like Square Enix, Sega, and Nintendo. And as we saw with the Nintendo deal, Nintendo was originally having the same policies, but then they adopted that Nintendo
the curator
program, which, to be honest, a lot of people thought was kind of sketchy and they didn't like. But I have to say, at this point in time, that is looking like a pretty good decision by comparison to things like this.
Yeah,
because
I would say, as far regarding the Nintendo curators program relative to this, is that it obviously is not the best way to go about doing things, but it really is, as far as I can tell, an honest effort to meet these media outlets halfway.
Yeah.
To try to take the concept of a new and evolving industry of journalism or review or any sort of product overview, rating systems, any of that kind of thing. To take that, and with this new wave of YouTube or anything involving the internet or game publications, the games industries, publishers, developers, indie and AAA and everywhere in between, seem to be in many respects struggling to catch up to how this is all evolving.
Yeah.
And although I don't think Nintendo's system is the best right now, I do think that it's an honest effort on their part to understand what's happening, to want to be understood by the reviewers, in the sense that we as Nintendo want you to understand our position,
right,
as well as we want to understand yours,
right,
and we want to meet you halfway.
Yeah.
And that's our curator program. That, compared to this, seems much better.
Yeah.
Because, and this was one of the biggest points that I was about to get to with Shadow of Mordor and with this new game, Dragon Quest, regarding the idea that, first and foremost, this seems like it was done as an act of shame. Like I said, shame might be a bit of a strong word, but to cover up elements of game coverage.
Yeah.
And the big issue with that for me is that Shadow of Mordor and Dragon Quest Heroes are both great games.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
And that's the irony behind it. And
yeah,
the real tragedy of this whole
great.
situation is that
I am amazed at Dragon Quest. That was the biggest point I've wanted to make. That's my finale point to this video, is that Dragon Quest Heroes is a fantastic game. The American audience is starved for Dragon Quest games. We did not get 10 here. We did not get the Wii Anniversary Collection. We've not got many.
The 3DS remake of 7 we didn't get.
3DS, yeah, 7. What's the other one that we didn't get?
There's been a new Dragon Quest Monsters that
recently.
that
I know there was a lot that we haven't gotten, but Hyrule Warriors was a different story. The Legend of Zelda is not a series that has American audiences starved the way that Dragon Quest fans are starved for a new game.
Yeah.
And people like you and I were big Dragon Quest fans, and we were excited about it, and we wanted to do a video about it.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest tragedy and travesty about all of this, is that we want Dragon Quest coverage here in the States.
Yeah.
Because we want Dragon Quest awareness. We want everyone to know that we love Dragon Quest, and we want all the Dragon Quest that gets released in Japan, we want it here.
Yeah.
And I feel like this whole embargo is a detriment to that, which has made all the more disappointing and tragic by the fact that Dragon Quest Heroes is a fantastic game.
Yeah. And that's when you look at the way that Dragon Quest has been handled in the States. It's been handled very poorly. And the other ironic point is that Dragon Quest has been one of those series, one of the few series that Square Enix has that has stuck true to its roots since the beginning.
Oh, from day one.
And you can see that in its gameplay. Even in Heroes, the closest game to the original source content in a Dynasty Warriors-esque game is Dragon Quest Heroes.
Yeah.
And the Dragon Quest X MMO feels like Dragon Quest. I've been lucky enough to play it, and I know that it's the craziest melding you would ever see. And with the American success of games like Bravely Default, we have seen that American audiences still love old-fashioned JRPGs. And the fact that Square Enix has ignored Dragon Quest in the US for so long, now finally releases a Dragon Quest title and puts a notice like this up in the front page of it to let people know that, hey, if you want to stream this, there's some terms involved, just further buries Dragon Quest in terms of its
releases a game
in terms of its exposure
and prevents the coverage and exposure of it.
Yeah. So
I really don't understand that. And as I said, the few dollars, I don't think that Square Enix is the kind of company that's hurting for money so much so that the pittance they would make from a content ID on people's Dragon Quest videos on YouTube is worth it compared to the exposure they would get on a really good game.
Right. Especially from a franchise as big as Dragon Quest.
The pedigree of Dragon Quest speaks for itself.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping that sometime in the very near future they reconsider this policy they've enacted, because it needs this game needs to be shown. It needs to be covered, and awareness for Dragon Quest really needs to come into the limelight a little more than it should, I think.
Yeah, and the West needs to see Dragon Quest a little more often than we have. Anyway, thanks for listening, everybody. There will be another gameplay video next time around, but we just wanted to let you guys know, in case anyone was wondering, where's that Dragon Quest Heroes video? And that's what's been going on. Thanks again for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.